The rotunda of the Capitol had rarely been so electric. It was a crisp spring morning, but inside the House chamber, the air felt combustible. The nation was watching, and everyone knew something seismic was about to unfold. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, a man known for his controlled demeanor and firm constitutional grounding, sat poised behind the rostrum. His gavel gleamed under the artificial lights as his hands rested lightly on the wood. In contrast, Congressman Jamie Raskin stood with his usual legal firepower, his speech prepped, annotated, and dripping with rhetorical sharpness. The topic: a controversial emergency resolution seeking to investigate alleged overreach by federal agencies in recent high-profile prosecutions. Ones that had quietly shaken faith in the system. C-SPAN viewership had spiked. Social media boiled with speculation. Even late-night hosts had prepped monologues for whatever was going to happen today. The divide between the parties had grown cavernous in the last year, and this hearing wasn't just political theater. It was the battleground for a deeper war of narratives. Jamie Raskin took the floor with a sharp inhale. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, today we confront a dangerous game being played with the pillars of democracy. A resolution cloaked in the language of justice, but forged in the fires of partisanship. The attempt to discredit federal prosecutors, to derail legitimate investigations. This is not oversight. This is sabotage. The room buzzed. Democrats nodded in agreement. Republicans scowled or whispered strategy. Raskin continued with all the passion of a constitutional scholar and former professor. We are not judges here. We are legislators. Our job is not to bend the facts, not to inject conspiracy where evidence fails, but to uphold the rule of law. And this resolution, that will be enough, came the steady voice of Mike Johnson, cutting through the chamber like a knife. The room fell silent. Raskin looked stunned for a beat. Interruptions during prepared statements were rare, and Johnson's tone was not one of procedural clarification. It was decisive, unyielding. I gave you the courtesy of context, Congressman, Johnson continued, standing now. But you've moved beyond debate into grandstanding, and I will not allow the House floor to become a platform for misdirection. Gasps echoed from both sides. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, Raskin began. No, Johnson said, firm and measured. It is with all due respect that I intervene, because this isn't about you or me. This is about truth. Raskin stepped back, unsure whether to yield or retaliate. Johnson turned to the chamber. For too long, this body has allowed itself to drift from its constitutional mandate. We've tolerated the weaponization of oversight, the politicization of justice, and the erosion of civil discourse in these halls. And I, for one, will not preside over the continuation of that decline. The air shifted. The speaker wasn't just reprimanding Raskin, he was calling out the entire House. Let's be clear, Johnson continued. This resolution doesn't target prosecutors because of who they prosecuted. It demands transparency from those wielding power, regardless of the badge they wear or the office they hold. Accountability is not partisanship. Asking questions isn't sabotage. It's our job. Raskin tried to regain footing. Then why not include investigations of Republican-aligned efforts? Why the selective focus? Johnson's eyes locked on him. Because selective focus is what we're correcting. For years, certain investigations were given a pass. Leaks, secret memos, sealed indictments, all under the guise of national interest. But when that veil slips, when evidence of coercion, coordination, and compromised justice comes forward, suddenly we're told to look away. His voice rose slightly, but it wasn't theatrical, it was raw conviction. And I will not look away. Not now. Not ever. There was a pause. A rare, genuine moment of uncertainty filled the room. Raskin sat down, his expression unreadable. Was it frustration? Shock? Or grudging respect? The gavel came down once. Recess for 10 minutes, Johnson declared. And when we return, we vote not on party lines, but on principle. The murmurs began again, louder now. Reporters scrambled to update headlines. Phones buzzed across the chamber. America had just witnessed a line in the sand. And this was only the beginning. As the chamber emptied into side hallways and conference rooms, Speaker Mike Johnson retreated into his office, flanked by his trusted legislative director, Marcus Hale. Sir, Marcus said, lowering his voice, you sure you want to go this hard? Raskin's already coordinating with 3 committee chairs to push back. They're planning to paint this whole thing as a GOP cover-up. Johnson glanced over his shoulder, calm but resolute. Let them try. I've seen the files. Marcus hesitated. You mean those files? The ones from May? Yes, Johnson interrupted. The whistleblower package. Weeks earlier, a senior official from the Department of Justice had sent an encrypted dossier to the Speaker's office. Its contents were staggering: internal memos, encrypted emails, and chain-of-command breakdowns that suggested political interference in several federal prosecutions. Names were redacted, but connections were clear. One particular case had a glaring pattern of leaks and manipulation, with political consultants acting as unofficial advisors to federal prosecutors. Johnson had kept it quiet. Until now. Back in the chamber, the air was thick with post-recess tension. C-SPAN's viewership had surged even higher. TikTok and YouTube were already filled with clips titled "Mike Johnson Destroys Raskin" and "Raskin Caught Off Guard." Commentary split fast and furiously. But none of that compared to what came next. As lawmakers trickled back in, a USB drive was quietly handed to the chamber clerk by one of Johnson's aides. Within moments, its contents were projected onto the chamber screens, not for the public yet, but for House members only. Before we vote, Johnson began as he took the floor again, I'm invoking a special disclosure under Rule 11. Each member of this chamber has a constitutional right to view relevant evidence before rendering judgment. What you see here is real, verified, and damning. The screens lit up with an email thread. Subject: need confirmation from the DNC before moving forward on indictment timeline. The sender's name was redacted, but the recipient was a mid-level DOJ official. The timestamp aligned precisely with the week a major conservative donor was indicted during the last election cycle. The room exploded into whispers and gasps. Raskin stood up again, visibly rattled. Mr. Speaker, we can't authenticate these documents. You can't just drop digital grenades like this without verification. I already did, Johnson replied, tapping a manila folder in front of him. These were confirmed last week by an independent forensic team based in Colorado. Their report is available to every member in that folder. And more is coming. The Democrats scrambled to respond, but even a few on their side looked shaken. Johnson wasn't bluffing, and the contents weren't coming from a think tank or Twitter feed. This was internal. Jamie Raskin stepped forward again, this time measured. Then let's have a full hearing. Let's bring in the forensic team, the DOJ, and get to the bottom of it. Don't turn this floor into a courtroom. That's exactly why we're doing this here, Johnson replied, unwavering. Because the courtroom is compromised. And if we don't address this now, we may never get another chance. He motioned toward the screen again. Another slide, please. A new image appeared. This time, it was a calendar log showing repeated, undocumented visits from a White House advisor to the office of the special counsel investigating a Republican congressman. No logs, no press briefings. Just shadow meetings. Look around you, Johnson said, turning to the full chamber. Is this the America we pledged to serve? Where justice depends on who you know or who you oppose. Raskin, for once, didn't speak. He simply looked at the screens, then down at the folder on his desk. His fingers drummed lightly, tensely. The speaker walked back to the rostrum. This isn't a takedown. It's a wake-up call. And before this day ends, you'll all have to decide whether you serve a party or a republic. Silence. For nearly 20 seconds, nobody moved. No papers shuffled. No phones buzzed. Just the raw, chilling stillness of truth settling like dust on polished desks. Then Johnson looked out at the chamber and said quietly, "Vote your conscience." Capitol Hill had seen debates, scandals, and late-night filibusters, but nothing like this. Within minutes of the file drops during the session, a political earthquake had begun rumbling beyond the chamber walls. Newsrooms scrambled. Social media turned into a battleground of competing narratives. Hashtag Unleash the Truth and hashtag Johnson versus Raskin trended across the country. But inside the chamber, Mike Johnson was unshaken. He had set the tone. This wasn't about political theater anymore, it was about who controlled the narrative of justice in America. Jamie Raskin, who had been uncharacteristically silent after the bombshell email disclosures, stood slowly. He looked exhausted but not defeated. His voice was low but forceful. Mr. Speaker, he began, I won't insult this chamber by pretending those documents aren't disturbing. They are. And if authenticated as you claim, they demand a serious investigation. But transparency must cut both ways. He gestured toward the Republican side. We cannot pretend this chamber exists in a vacuum. We cannot use truth as a weapon only when it suits us. Johnson narrowed his eyes. And we haven't. But here's the difference, Congressman. You speak of balance while evidence of imbalance is right in front of you. Raskin stepped closer, his tone sharpening. Let's not play innocent here. You've had this for weeks. And you waited for the perfect political moment just before a key vote to unleash it like a political nuke. Johnson didn't flinch. I waited until I had confirmation. Until I knew that what we'd show wouldn't collapse under scrutiny. Timing matters, but truth matters more. A murmur of agreement ran through the Republican benches. On the Democratic side, faces were less certain. Some looked concerned, others defensive, and a few looked like they were seeing cracks in a wall they once thought impenetrable. Then, a surprise. Congresswoman Rachel Wyatt, a moderate Democrat from Pennsylvania known for her independence, stood up and requested the floor. The chamber hushed again. Mr. Speaker, Congressman Raskin, she said calmly, this chamber deserves to stop pretending the public hasn't noticed what's happening. I've knocked on thousands of doors back home. People are tired. Not just of corruption, but of cover-ups. If this evidence is real, I don't care which party it implicates. She turned to Raskin. Jamie, we can't deflect this. We owe it to our voters to get real answers. Even Raskin looked taken aback. Then came another shift. Congressman Elijah Reyes, a newly elected Republican from Arizona, stood and said, it's time we bust through the echo chambers. Our loyalty shouldn't be to the color of our party banners, it should be to the Constitution. That one line hit harder than a dozen talking points. Johnson seized the moment. Exactly. And that's why this resolution matters. It calls not for vengeance, not for spectacle, but for clarity. It creates a bipartisan investigative subcommittee, one with equal powers of subpoena and testimony that can probe the coordination between federal prosecutors, political operatives, and government agencies. He turned to face every member directly. I'm not asking you to vote red or blue. I'm asking you to vote clean. Then something even more dramatic happened. The chamber doors opened as one of Johnson's aides entered and whispered something in his ear. Johnson's face remained composed, but the weight of what he heard was evident. He looked up. Members of the House, I've just been informed that 3 additional whistleblowers from within the DOJ have stepped forward. They've submitted written testimony to our committee and are requesting full public hearings. Gasps erupted across the floor. Raskin's expression changed again. This time, there was something deeper there. Not fear. Not anger. Something closer to recognition. This changes everything, someone whispered. Johnson nodded. We will reconvene this evening for a classified preview of their statements. And then, if this House still believes in its oath, we'll open those hearings to the American people. Unredacted. Unfiltered. Unspun. He looked at Raskin one last time. You wanted the truth, Congressman. Now it's coming. Whether you're ready or not. By nightfall, the Capitol was surrounded not just by protesters and media vans, but by a nation's curiosity on edge. America hadn't seen this kind of bipartisan tension in years. Journalists whispered of a constitutional reckoning. Podcasters raced to record emergency episodes. Even Hollywood actors were tweeting about what Johnson just did. Inside, the atmosphere was colder and more somber. Members of Congress filed back into the secure briefing room, no cameras, no aides. Only lawmakers and legal counsel. The walls were thick, the doors sealed. The speaker sat at the front beside a tall, gray-haired man wearing a DOJ badge and civilian suit, Thomas Kincaid, a whistleblower and former internal ethics officer. Johnson began. This is a closed briefing. What you hear tonight cannot be spun. It cannot be erased. And once we open this to the public, if you still have the spine to do so, there's no going back. He gestured toward Kincaid. Sir, the floor is yours. Kincaid stood, voice soft but unwavering. I served the Department of Justice for 27 years. I oversaw internal compliance during 3 administrations. I've been loyal to the rule of law, but I can't ignore what I saw these last 18 months. He handed out copies of his affidavit as he spoke. Starting last year, I noticed irregularities in coordination between federal prosecutors and private consulting firms. These firms, some directly tied to campaign strategists, were helping draft legal strategies for criminal indictments. Gasps again? Not just that, Kincaid continued. In several cases, charges were timed to disrupt political fundraising or close races. This wasn't just unethical, it was engineered. Evidence was reshaped, narratives fed to press leaks before legal teams even got discovery. Jamie Raskin, sitting close to the front, leaned forward. Mr. Kincaid, can you name names? Or is this all theoretical? Kincaid nodded solemnly. I can. And I have. In this binder are communications between DOJ officials and representatives from organizations such as the Catalyst Group, Progressive America Now, and even certain media liaisons. I've submitted these documents under penalty of perjury. One lawmaker from the Democratic side muttered, "Jesus." Johnson interjected, "You're about to hear from 2 more witnesses also from within the DOJ who corroborate this timeline. But this is the key question you all need to ask yourselves tonight. If justice is being used as a weapon, what do we do when the weapon turns inward?" The room went quiet. No grandstanding. No snarky remarks. Just the slow realization that something was deeply broken. Then came whistleblower number 2, a younger woman named Laura Pennington who had served as an IT contractor managing data logs for the DOJ. Her job had been routine until she was asked to scrub metadata from email threads sent to and from off-books addresses connected to political operatives. "They told me it was a mistake," Laura explained. "But when I brought it up again, I was told if I ever went public, I'd be blacklisted from federal work. My contract was terminated 2 days later." Several members shifted in their seats, visibly disturbed. The third whistleblower, an anonymous statement read by legal counsel, confirmed meetings where attorneys were instructed to lean charges against figures who had made strong political donations to Republican super PACs. The goal, as stated in the memo, was to create enough noise to chill political participation. When it was done, nobody moved. Not for a full minute. Jamie Raskin finally stood again. His voice was low. Tired. Honest. "Mr. Speaker, if even half of this is true, we're not just dealing with a partisan problem, we're looking at a collapse of public trust in our institutions." Johnson nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I shut you down on that floor. Because the truth was already loaded and ready to fire." Raskin exhaled, sat, and said nothing more. A gavel hit the desk. "Tomorrow morning," Johnson said, "we make it public. All of it." By dawn, America was awake. The House Oversight Committee chamber had been transformed into a war room. Cables snaked across the floors, connecting feeds from every major network. Every seat in the press gallery was filled. Journalists jostled for space. Camera lights flooded the dais. The livestream counter on YouTube and C-SPAN ticked into the millions. Speaker Mike Johnson entered the room with a silent gravity. Behind him walked whistleblowers Thomas Kincaid and Laura Pennington and several members of the bipartisan subcommittee. Jamie Raskin was already seated, eyes dark, jaw tight, not an adversary anymore, but something closer to a soldier in the same trench. Johnson called the hearing to order. "This morning," he said, "we strip away the illusions. We give the American people what they've been denied for too long, the unvarnished truth." The first part of the hearing replayed the now authenticated emails on massive monitors. A chain of digital correspondence laid bare conversations between DOJ officials and political campaign entities clearly strategizing how to maximize media impact around key indictments. Next came audio recordings. A clip played of a high-ranking DOJ consultant saying, "We can't indict in July, fundraising reports come out mid-month. Do it late June, get ahead of the finance bump." Then, a longer, more damning recording. A phone call between a Democratic operative and a DOJ liaison planning the release of sealed documents. The voice was clear. The timing precise. The strategy unmistakable. By noon, the mood had changed. What began as skepticism had turned into national embarrassment. Political operatives once untouchable were now exposed. The DOJ, still officially silent, issued a short statement calling the evidence deeply troubling and announced an internal investigation. But the public knew better. Twitter melted. TikTok blew up with live commentary and video breakdowns. Even CNN aired the full hearing without commercial break, calling it a moment of reckoning unlike any in modern political history. Then Mike Johnson did something unexpected. He looked across the dais at Jamie Raskin. "Congressman," he said, "I believe you have something to say." Raskin stood. His voice was clear, without anger or deflection. "I came into this chamber yesterday believing I had the moral high ground. That oversight was being abused. That this resolution was political theater. But I was wrong." Gasps from across the room. Reporters furiously typed. Johnson blinked, perhaps even surprised. Raskin continued. "I was wrong to assume motive before seeing the evidence. And I was wrong to downplay the signs that many of us ignored because we were afraid of what we might find." He turned toward Johnson. "Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my objections. And I support your resolution to create a full independent commission. One with the power to subpoena anyone, regardless of political affiliation. The American people deserve the truth no matter where it leads." The room erupted not in applause, but in the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Then, in an act of unprecedented unity, Raskin crossed the chamber and sat beside Johnson on the majority side. One by one, lawmakers from both parties followed. Moderate Democrats, outspoken Republicans, freshman representatives, senior figures, all taking a symbolic stand. By the end of the day, the vote passed 402 to 33. The Truth Commission was born. It would lead to 6 resignations, 3 criminal investigations, and the largest overhaul of prosecutorial conduct in U.S. history. But more importantly, it reminded America of something it had almost forgotten, that truth still mattered even when it hurt.